Welcome to another episode of Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, Jon Braddock, the author of Click Here When I Die, and the founder of My Life and Wishes, the Legacy Vault, an online planning and document storage solution created to make things easier for those that you love. So, whether you've been a caregiver, are currently a caregiver, or simply want to better understand the emotional and practical challenges families face when a loved one can no longer care for themselves, this episode is absolutely for you. I'm honored to introduce today's guest. She is someone who embodies service, resilience, and heart. Julie Moore is a retired U.S. Army veteran with 30 years of dedicated service to our country. During her military career, she earned a Master's of Science in Performance Improvements, became a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, and served in leadership roles, including Inspector General and Chief Instructor. She retired with numerous meritorious awards, but if you ask her, her greatest reward was the lasting friendships that she built along the way. Born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida, Julie now resides in Southwest Florida with her husband. She's the proud mother of two, Kate and Adam, and grandmother to two wonderful grandchildren. But Julie's latest and perhaps most personal mission is that of a caregiver and advocate. After stepping into the role of caring for her older brother, who was diagnosed with early-onset dementia, and her aging mother, Julie began journaling her experiences as a way to process and preserve them. What began as a personal practice evolved into a heartfelt and powerful debut book, I Am Their Voice, a guide for caregivers and advocates. She runs a mobile notary business. She wakes up at 5 a.m. for her daily workout and continues to live out the Army motto, doing more before 9 a.m. than most of us do all day. And while she claims she doesn't have many hobbies, she does enjoy quiet moments in nature, sipping fine bourbon, and she loves to dance. Julie, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jon. It is truly a pleasure to be here and have this opportunity to share.
Great. Well, I'm so happy to have you. We've known each other for about a year or so,
True.
in the business world. And the one thing I did not know, because you keep secrets very well, was that you were writing a book this whole time.
Yeah, I was. I
Uh,
was.
that's that's awesome. Which is no easy task. I've been through the process myself, but when you have passion in your heart and there's something you want to share with the world, you make time for it, right?
That is true. And that's what I did. It took me a few years to get there, but this voice was in the back of my head. It's like, you need to do it. You need to do it. It's now's the time. Now's the time. So I made it happen.
That's awesome, and it's great that your family had the patience with you while you were going through that as well.
True.
So your bio, or shall we say resume, is super impressive. First and foremost, let me say, and hopefully for all of our listeners, to thank you for your dedication and service to our great country over the last 30 years.
Thank you.
That know that your sacrifice, commitment, and courage are deeply appreciated and will never be forgotten.
Thank you, Jon. I really appreciate that.
You know, I appreciate you and all that our military does for this great nation. So possibly we're going to have to devote another episode to our shared love of fine bourbon,
Okay.
which I didn't know. We could probably do a whole show on that. We could talk about, Whistle Pig, Woodford, Blanton's, Michener's, and of course Pappy Van Winkle's.
You
But
can leave Pappy out of it, and we can talk Four Roses or something like that. So.
we'll bring some Four Roses, some small batch, right?
Single barrel actually
Single
is even
barrel.
better. It's smoother.
Nice. Well, I imagine when you were going through what you went through, you probably needed to sip a little bourbon from time to time just to clear the head. But
It
we'll
would have
get
been
back
nice,
to
although I didn't a whole lot. So
yeah, but we'll get back to bourbon and other topics like that. But today we're here to discuss your new book. Again, Ooh, you see that showing up on the
Yep, it
screen?
looks really good. And I see a
Great.
lot of tabs there, Jon.
I Am Their Voice, a guide for caregivers and advocates, which was just released last month. Yes, there are a lot of sticky notes. I do a lot of highlighting. So whenever I read books that I'm really interested in and want to remember things, I have little sticky notes and a highlighter with me. And so I probably should have only highlighted the parts of the book that didn't mean something to me, because the whole book is pretty much highlighted. So, but your personal stories and challenges you faced and endured had me thinking that, man, you must be a superwoman, because I don't know that I could get through that. But what really struck me the most is that in this book, it's so raw and honest. It had me reflecting on some caregiving stories I've encountered through the years. But let's start with what inspired you to write I Am Their Voice. Was there a specific moment when you knew this story just had to be shared?
So I believe my inspiration really comes from a desire to educate wherever there's a gap of knowledge, a gap of information. And that was probably the most prominent thing that I discovered when I began caring for both my brother and my mom. Whenever I would take them to the doctor, a doctor's office, or if I had to take them to a hospital, to an ER. Just in the beginning, let's say going to a specialist, and me being a new caregiver at that time, trying to understand what is it that I'm dealing with here? What should I know? And you're literally handed, if you're lucky, a brochure that says you can read about it here. There's some organizations that maybe you can join and try and find a support group. And that was it. So that became very frustrating to me. And walking into it, I know my expectations were extremely high. I wanted more from the doctors and from the specialists. I expected more. And I just became so attached to that expectation. I had to learn to let that expectation go and just literally start researching on my own. And I did that. And I did find organizations and support groups and different educators out there that could help me on that journey. So it's just a desire to fill that gap. And I believe this book does that.
Yeah, it definitely does. Again, for anyone that's in a caregiving situation currently, or may be in the future, or even if you know someone, a family member that's doing that, grab this book. In fact, don't grab the book; grab 2 or 3 copies and
Thank you.
share them
Yes,
with your family.
definitely
Because
share.
when you mentioned when you first talking to the specialists and the doctors and stuff, and it's, well, here's a pamphlet, right? There's a support group. Well, it's like you can thumb through it, which probably doesn't tell you all that much. And then your next thought is, when the hell do you think I have time to go to a support group? I'm
Exactly.
caring for 2 people, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was also the frustrating part. And I did end up finding, online support groups. Um, and as much as how our society has just gotten so ingrained with the whole online stuff, I believe there's a place for that, but I really prefer in person. But then you still run into that wall of, well, I'm a 24/7 caregiver. Now I need to figure out. I had never heard the term respite, you know, um, but now I do. So again, I'm trying to educate that, there's facilities out there, rehab centers that offer this thing called respite, where you could take your loved one in for maybe a couple of days, maybe a week. It depends on their program. You do have to pay for it, but sometimes there's entities out there that can help you pay for it, or agencies that can help you pay for it. So just knowing that there were so many different resources out there, and I just wasn't aware of it at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, respite is truly amazing. When you're in a situation, and I'm preaching to the choir, to you on this, but when you're in a situation of caregiving, like you endured throughout this, self-care becomes so important, because you're just wearing yourself out, and respite, a place where you can place your loved one where they're safe and secure and taken care of for a period of time so that you can recover, rejuvenate, and come back at 100%,
Right.
is so essential. And I'll ask you about this, a little bit down the road here in our conversation, but yeah, it's not inexpensive, much like a lot of things, but certain things like long-term care insurance can certainly provide and cover for a lot of those kind of things. So I'll ask you more specific, and also if I forget, because I tend to do that. Also, I want to ask you a little deeper into the show here about, you're going in, you're talking to specialists and doctors and things. Well, there's such a thing as HIPAA, and other things, and so I want to ask you about, the essential documents that
Sure.
that family should have as well.
Absolutely.
Another thing I really picked up on in your book, and I really appreciate, is how you don't sugarcoat the emotional toll of caregiving. I mean, you lay it out there. It's not just about managing medications and appointments. It's
Mm-mm.
about dealing with the grief, identity shifts, and redefining, what the relationship actually is.
Right.
How did you personally navigate the emotional, undercurrents, and still show up day after day?
I had to get to a point because I grieved a lot. There were many, many days, and I mention it in the book. Just standing in the hot shower became my 10 minutes of bliss, of quiet. Um, and I would just cry. Sometimes I would literally sit in the tub and just cry just to get it out. And what I had to kind of come to terms with was every morning when I woke up, I would just say to myself, this is a new day. Let's start this new day. Let's see what the day brings. And I still had my routines. I kept my brother on a routine and my mom the best I could. My mom, she could do all of her activities of daily living. She was pretty self sufficient. She just needed a little extra care and oversight where my brother could not. And I tried to stick to that routine. It helped me kind of stay sane because I knew what to expect, but it also gave him some familiarity with different things. Did it work perfectly? Absolutely not. But I think the biggest thing was just waking up and agreeing and accepting that this is a new day and I just need to deal with today.
Yeah. And so mom, at least, at some stage, she could still care for herself. She hadn't lost her ADLs. But Clint, your brother, on the other hand, he had lost many of his ADLs. Is that correct?
Correct. I had to help him get dressed. I had to take him to the bathroom. I had to clean him up. I had to bathe him. I had to feed him. Um, I mean, he was mobile for the first couple of year and a half or so that I had him. But then he eventually ended up in a wheelchair, and then of course bedridden by the
Mm.
end.
Wow. That's just trying to imagine it. You really even can't imagine it if you've not like lived through that situation. Um,
It's tough.
yeah, you also talk about the importance of community, having other people to connect with, talk to, and again, trying not to reinvent the wheel,
Hmm.
find out from others, which obviously is you couldn't find a lot of those resources, which is what inspired you to write this book, to really help people. um, but so many caregivers, you indicate, just feel isolated, right? So what
Right.
advice would you give someone if they're just now beginning the caregiving journey?
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. Reach out even to family and friends. That's where I started. Um, like I had some friends that had already gone through this journey. They had a mother that had Alzheimer's. Their father had a heart condition. And then somebody else's mother had Parkinson's disease. So just reaching out to them, and I'm like, all right, I'm at this point with him. What did y'all do when you were at this gate? How do I deal with this? How do I navigate? Who do I call? And that was just very helpful in and of itself. And then also too, people from church. We were members of a wonderful church in Tampa, and just sharing stories. We'd go to church and I would happen to mention, well, this is, such and such is what I'm dealing with right now. And somebody inevitably would chime in, well, my dad went through that and this is what we did. So just hearing other people's ideas kind of keeps me hanging on to that hope of, okay, that's something I haven't tried. Let me try it. So just really reaching out. Don't be afraid to ask other people. If you can find those support groups, go ahead and join them, even if it is online. Maybe you prefer online. But hearing other people's stories, you don't always have to share. You can just listen to other people. And when you hear that somebody else is truly dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with, it just makes it easier to open up. And again, you get that feedback, you get some ideas, and I just believe it would help.
It's again, I can't, imagine being in the situation, but I can imagine how supportive the group would be. I've got a lot of very dear friends that struggle with addictions in our 12-step programs. And it's like you say, when they first get in there, they don't want to talk, because there's, and I'm sure it's the same way here. There's, maybe some shame, maybe you're embarrassed.
Yes.
And those kind of things.
Oh, yeah. Because and you say embarrassed, I can relate to that because there were a few times as this disease progressed with my brother, he would just yell. And at first we were living in an apartment. You know how thin those walls are, in just a regular apartment. And I was just waiting for police officers to come knock on my door. Is everything okay? And I'm just, oh my God. Or we'd be out walking and he might get frustrated and be pulling back instead of just walking. And so I'm waiting for someone to see this altercation, what they perceive as an altercation. Fortunately, none of that ever happened. But that thought is always going through your head.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you say to somebody if they're in that situation, to don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed.
So one of the things I did learn, and I actually did, you can literally take a piece of paper and you can attach it to the back of their shirt. They don't know it's there. And it says, please excuse my outburst. I am dealing with a form of dementia that causes this. Something short, sweet, but it explains it. And there were a couple of times that I would catch somebody's view looking at us, and I would intentionally, because I would hold my brother's hand sometimes to help him walk. I would walk backwards as he would walk forward. And if they were over here, I would turn us around so they could see the note and then walk the other way.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I always try and add a little levity whenever I can. So sadly, Michelle's probably going to hear this and she's probably going to put a note on my back that I don't know is there that says, please excuse his outburst. He's getting old and has no filter.
I approve that.
Well, you've known me long enough through our couple of times a month meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but that's a great idea to do that. I really like that.
Yeah. And then also I did buy him one of those medical bracelets that just had my phone number on it and then what his disease was. If perchance we ever got separated or whatever.
Yeah, so important, so important. Um,
Very.
so in the book, you also include some, more uplifting moments and stories that, kind of bring hope. Are there any specific moments, even something small that, you know, reminded you of why you were doing this you'd like to share?
So I think the biggest thing deals with music. So our family has always loved music. We love music. We love dancing. And my brother Clint was a drummer in high school, and he played a little bit in his adult life. And I had a sister-in-law actually that had developed Alzheimer's, and it was while my mom was caring for her too. My mom's a retired nurse, but she was help caring for her. And I remember reading an article somewhere about music. Let them hear music, and you will see a different person. So my sister-in-law, um, big Christian, loved Christian music, and I took earbuds and I put it in her ear and I turned on a Christian station. And where she was just kind of slumped over, kind of depressed, the body language in a chair, as soon as that music came on, her face lit up. She stood up and she just started dancing. I did the same thing with my brother. So Clint, with his form of dementia, which was frontal temporal dementia, FTD, it affects the frontal lobes. So speech, vision, motor skills, and anxiety. He also had high anxiety. And if he ever got anxious, I remembered what happened with my sister-in-law. I'm like, you know what? Let me try something. I put on classical music, classical piano music. And if he was having one of his episodes where he was just overly anxious, like it was like he was on speed, his whole body would melt and just completely relax. And I would sit him on the couch. And if he would either doze off or he would just sit there almost in a meditative state. And I was just like, wow, that worked. And then one time his daughter came to visit, and where he can't talk anymore. It's just mumble. We put on some dance music, and I've got videos. I've got tons of videos. And he just got up and was just moving around. It was like you never know that he had this illness going on in his brain. And he was a completely different person. And we're like, there's Clint. We
Wow.
found him.
Wow.
So it was just an amazing thing to witness.
That's really beautiful. I really love that. I know Clint was also an artist. Is that right?
He just nothing big or fancy. He just dabbled in it when he was in high school and a little bit through the years, but nothing significant. Not like his music or he also liked playing soccer, and he got to a point to where he taught kids. He worked with a lot of kids, teaching them soccer.
Wow. That's neat. Yeah, because I wondered, like, as I read through and learned about that and the art and think about what you say about the music, because once that gets in, that penetrates something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, and maybe if someone has a love of art or even soccer, if you were to just take them out to the soccer pitch on the sideline, they can just see the things that are going on. Does
Oh,
that get in, or an art gallery?
I would bet you say yeah. I'm sure it would. Now, in the beginning, um, I would give him crayons and a coloring book, and it's just that it was progressing so fast. He started losing those fine motor skills, so he couldn't even hold a pencil or a crayon or anything. So that
Mm.
was just kind of out of the question. But getting him on his feet with a good dance song or whatever, yeah. Or we'd go to church and the band would be playing, and he'd just be tapping on the chair in front of him, and it was nice.
Uh, again, in your book, and again, I mean, it's just it's you being real and raw, and you put yourself out there, and There's so many great pictures in your book,
Thank
of your family, of mom, and I think pictures of your dad are in there, and yeah, really neat. And I love the at the end in your epilogue, you had uh, pictures of was it the doves?
Cardinals.
Cardinals, the Cardinals. I've often heard that, and Michelle talks about this from her dad, seeing Cardinals and come. Can you talk about that moment? Because I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So it was probably, so they both passed away in the month of April, and it happened in the month of May. So about a month after they both passed. Um, I was the first one out in the condo that I used to live in. I had a pretty large lanai, and I had these big chimes that was hanging out on the lanai. And because they were inside the lanai, it was screened in. They didn't always blow because we usually kept the windows kind of closed just to keep the heat out. So anyway, I'm cleaning house, and all of a sudden I heard one chime ding, and it caught my attention. So I stopped, and I'm look outside, and I'm looking at the trees to see if maybe the wind's blowing, if maybe something finally caught the chimes. Trees are not blowing. I'm like, huh. And then I heard it again, another chime. I'm like, okay. And I felt this push, spiritual push, whatever you want to call it. But I stepped out onto the night, and it was like another push to go to the door that led outside to the backyard. So I opened the door, and there was this cardinal 4 feet away from me, staring up at me, dancing around, spinning in circles. And I just smiled. It was a bright red cardinal, which I later learned that's the male cardinal. The
Mhm.
female cardinals kind of have like a tannish brown look to them, color. Um, but I saw that one just dancing around, and I'm like, Clint, that's Clint. And then I think actually it was a week before that. We were outside in the pool, and I saw these two cardinals up on the roof, and I just took a picture, and I totally forgot about it. Didn't put two and two together. As I was preparing for this book, I was going through looking at those pictures. Those two cardinals I saw, one was a male, one was a female. I'm sorry, I'm claiming it. That's Mama and Clint. So,
Absolutely.
but I shared it with my siblings, and within a couple of days of me seeing the one cardinal dance around, my sister saw one on her fence. That afternoon, my other sister saw one outside her back door. And then our brother also saw one. And then Clint's girlfriend, when I got to a point to share with her, and she actually shares her story in the book, the same story. When we shared with her what we were experiencing with the cardinal, she's like, no way. The day of his passing, she was out for a walk, and which they lived on the same street. When she went down to the end of the street, there's this large tree it's like a cul-de-sac. And as she was passing that large tree, which was right outside the house he used to live in, um, this big cardinal flew right past her, basically got her attention, went back up on a lower limb, and just sat there and kept singing. And she just stopped, and she was just like, I love you, Clint. I see you. And he sang a few more verses, and then he flew away.
Uh, those stories are
Yeah.
amazing when you
I
hear
love
those.
him. I love
And
him.
and when you talk about that one cardinal and just hopping around, it just took me right back to the story you told about when you put the earbuds on him
Yeah.
and played the music and he got up and danced and you're like,
Yes.
there's Clint.
Yeah.
And there was Clint again. That's
Oh, yeah.
beautiful. Very touching.
Really cool. Really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that it's those little things that just, you know, those connections, those little tidbits of humanity,
Yes.
and messages are just incredible. See, one
Messages from
thing,
beyond.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. We're, our loved ones are never gone, right?
true.
They're always with us. So earlier in the show, and I just want to touch on this, um, because on my show, Stay Playing Nightmares, we talk a lot about the importance of planning,
Right.
and and a lot focuses on legal documents and emotional things and those kind of things. So as a caregiver, what do you think in terms of advanced planning and those things that people should be considering now or getting done to avoid some of the pitfalls perhaps that are waiting if they don't prepare for things?
So being in the military, it was already kind of drilled in our head. We had to have a last will and testament. We had to have a power of attorney. We had to have a medical surrogate identified, or so a living will or advanced directive. Um, and knowing that, and with my brother being retired Air Force, he did have some of those documents already in place. And so when I took them both in and I read through them, well, actually, I'm sorry, back up. When we were still in the process of getting Clint diagnosed, he was not fully diagnosed and he was still fairly articulate. I immediately took him on base to the JAG office and I'm like, we need to update all of these documents. He was still cognizant and capable to say, I want this changed, I want this changed, or whatever. So he could sign it. And we had made sure we had it. Once I moved them both in with me, mom didn't have those things. So I set her up with an attorney. And because she did have, a property and she had a couple of things, specifics that she wanted each child to have or whatever, um, we did have a complete trust written up for her. So my recommendation, bare minimum, have a last will and testament. As a caregiver, you're going to need that power of attorney because you're going to find yourself in situations where agencies are not going to talk to you. It might be Medicare, it might be the bank, because you have to receive that power. And the only person that can give you the power is the person you're caring for, if it's their account. So I would still take it a step further. If you're able to get a trust, that's what I would recommend, because a trust can function, it can be active, if I can use that term, before your loved one passes away. A last will and testament is not engaged until the person is deceased. So if
Right.
all you have is a last will and testament, great and fine. The bank don't care what they want to leave behind. They need to know, what kind of power do you have right now? And that's where that power of attorney comes in. And then dealing with the doctors and HIPAA, you mentioned HIPAA earlier. The doctors need to know that they're allowed to talk to you. They need to know how much decision-making authority that you have. So that's where having that living or advanced directive or the living will comes into play, because your loved one has clearly said and documented, if for whatever reason I can't talk and you need an answer to something, this is who I want you to talk to. And I share in the book, I had to face those decisions with my mom as well as my brother, but I get very specific on a certain situation with my mom.
Yeah.
So,
And it's so important, I mean, again, 50% of the population doesn't even have a will, right? But you know well, you actually do. It's the state that you live in, and the state will make all the decisions for you, and that might not be what you want. With uh, POAs, specifically a financial POA, for people that might be listening, if a person has a will and you've got the healthcare power of attorney and advanced directives or living will, and you also are their financial power of attorney, so you're taking care of bills and doing other things that you need to do. The minute that your loved one passes, that POA is no longer good.
Absolutely.
The bank won't talk to you,
Yep.
and if you think, well, we'll just use some of this money to take care of final arrangements, if you're not going to be able to touch it until you get to an attorney and go through the process and everything else. Whereas with a trust, there are trustees, and the trustee, that power will remain,
Correct.
after they pass. So there are little things, and yeah, I am not an attorney by any stretch of
Hmm.
the imagination, and nor is Julie,
Ditto.
but life circumstances have put us in positions where we've had to learn an awful lot about this. So, my number one recommendation to everybody, not even if you're in a caregiver situation or not, everybody needs to have the correct documents in place. And again, as I always say, if you're going to do a will and POAs and HIPAA and advanced directives, et cetera, do a trust instead. It may cost a little bit more, but it's going to make things a heck of a lot easier for your family at the end of the
Exactly.
day. Yeah.
And that was one great thing with my siblings. I mean, we all knew exactly what our parents wanted. So my dad actually passed away a couple of years before my mom and my brother did. And he was an old farm boy, eighth grade education. And he did go down to, I think, a local law office and was able to have a last will and testament drawn up. If it was 2 pages, I'd be surprised because he didn't have much. But he would call each of us kids and basically read those 2 pages to us. And he would say, "This is where it is, in the shed, right side, that's yours. In the shed, left side, that's yours, whatever." So it can, I mean, that's all he had. But everybody knew exactly what they wanted. So and I was the trustee, I was the executor of both of their wills. Um, there was nothing I could change. I'm like, this is what they want. This
Mm.
is this, there's no argument here. So,
And the beauty of that is, and your dad was really smart because the world that I live in and work with, and I talk to so many people who they have siblings that haven't spoken with one
yeah,
another in years
yeah.
because death, unless things are clearly spelled out and who gets what,
Hmm.
um, it's probably the most divisive time that you can go through because well, I want that, well, no, I want that, and all of a
Right,
sudden you got people fighting over stuff.
right.
And I just think it's so important to divide things, not
Yes,
families.
agreed.
So
Agreed. Well said.
dad was smart. Left side of here in the shed, right side over here.
Pretty much.
Yeah, very cool. um Couple more questions, and then we'll wrap because I'm just super intrigued. So we talk about respite care and things of
Hmm.
that nature, and we also talk about for a lot of people, if you have to go into assisted living situation, um, if a person has lost at least two of their ADLs, which again, folks, is activities of daily living, so things like bathing and toileting and transferring from here to there,
Right.
continence, those kind of things. If they've lost them, uh, it makes it much more difficult on the caregiver, as Julie can attest, because she had to do this for her brother. Um, and in assisted living or places of that nature, skilled nursing, in that case, I
Right.
mean, you're talking, depending on what state you live in, you're talking $12,000 to $15,000 a month,
Easy.
and none of us can afford that, right?
No.
Which is why I think long-term care insurance is pretty important consideration for people. Now, we're not going to get it if all of a sudden mom needs to go in to a
Right.
facility. We
True.
can't get it, but I look at it for myself. It's important that I have it, Michelle have it, so that our kids aren't necessarily burdened.
Agreed.
And those policies also include respite care and those kind of things even if you're doing the home care yourself, if the ADLs are gone, many
Hmm.
policies will still pay,
True.
even if they're not in the facility.
That is true. I can't speak to it a whole lot. I'm familiar with it. Um, Neither of my parents or my brother had long-term care. Now, my brother, because he's a veteran, and because I'm a veteran, my husband's a veteran, and we're both we both have. My brother didn't, but my husband and I both have received a disability rating of 100%. Um, there are benefits available to veterans that kind of sort of act like a long-term insurance plan. With my brother, because and I speak to this a little bit in the book, because he did not document a lot during his career because he was afraid of being ostracized, or if not being kicked out of the military. He never had anything documented, and because of that, when I tried to file for disability for him, there was nothing to say this is service related. So he could not receive any rating at all. And without any rating, left him kind of at the bottom of the list. He would be considered for some of these veteran homes, but his application would go to the bottom of the list if somebody with a rating came in. And I mean, he sat at this one facility. I tried probably almost a year to get him in and could never get him in. It was always one excuse after another. They never told me point blank what the issue was, but I later learned that was the issue. And they just kept saying, oh, it's been 3 months. Send us some more bank statements so we can check that out. Oh, well, we need another note from the doctor, some more notes from the doctor. And all they were doing was just stalling. So, long-term health coverage, I do see the benefit in it. It is certainly a personal decision. It's a hard decision to make because, it's like playing Russian roulette. You don't know if you're going to use it or not. But by God, it's better to have it and not need it, and need it and not have it. So,
Exactly. Exactly. My father-in-law had a policy because, as you know, Michelle and I are both in the insurance world for 30 some years. He had a long-term care policy, and it was designed that would cover him and Marie, my uh, mother-in-law. And every year around Christmas time, we'd be sitting around, we're having a little whiskey, we're talking. You pull out the long-term care, he's got the invoice for the premium. Well, I don't know if I want to, pay this again. We're never going to use it. Da, 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 da. It's like, Ted, you're going to pay your premium on that. If you don't, we're going to pay your premium because we know it can happen. Well, long story short, he died not needing it, but it transferred to my mother-in-law, because
oh,
it was a
wow.
joint policy. And upon the death of the first, the premiums were satisfied,
Oh,
didn't have to
wow.
pay again. And so he died in 2013. And in 2019, we had to move mom into assisted living.
Yeah.
And she was there. I mean, she passed during COVID. But for 2.5 years,
Hmm.
it covered everything.
Wow. That's
So
awesome. See, I didn't know that. I
thankfully
didn't know it
he
transferred.
yeah. And again, it depends on how the contract is written.
Gotcha.
So that requires a good financial professional to
Yeah.
set those kind of things up. But all we could say, Michelle and I, when we had to move Marie into the assisted living, it was like, thank God
Yeah.
he didn't just stop paying the premiums and just not tell us about
Right. Wow.
it. Yeah. So a lot of things that can help. Um, anyway, before we wrap up, um, I want to ask this: what do you hope readers walk away with after reading "I Am Their Voice"?
You know what? I'm going to steal something my sister just shared with me, because I think it answers that question to the T. The this is what my sister shared with me. She said, your book felt like a big hug.
Oh,
And she said, even though I was present for that journey, I lived it with you. It was like I was reading it for the first time, and it just drew me in, and it was just like a big hug. And I love that. So I've been getting a lot of positive feedback on it. People are absolutely resonating with it. I want people to know that they're not alone and that there are resources out there. And I provide a ton of resources that you can just start looking up right now. But yeah, I hope you do see the love that's in it. And I hope you walk away feeling like I just gave you a big hug.
I love that. And it does. And again, for people, even if you're not in a caregiver situation, um, read this book. It's one of those that, it's not like reading War and Peace, right? This is, you get into it and it just moves very nicely through each piece, and it's really eye opening. And so, like I say, everybody grab some copies of it. Um, let's see, Julie. Finally, I so appreciate you taking the time, the courage it took to write this book, exposing your vulnerability, giving a voice to so many caregivers who go unheard. So, again, listeners, I highly encourage you to get a copy of I Am Their Voice, a caregiver's guide, a guide for
Yes.
caregivers and advocates. And whether you're on the journey yourself or just want to better understand this, it's a powerful companion. Julie, how can folks find your book or connect with you online?
So you can certainly go to my website at iamtheirvoice.com. You can purchase the book through there. There is a link there. When you're done reading the book, there's another link. I greatly value your feedback and review. You can also find it on Amazon, Amazon Kindle, and it's also available in Barnes and Noble. And if I could further ask, because sometimes people feel like, well, I just don't want to buy anything right now. You don't have to. Go to your local library and just ask them to order the book for you. And then it not only gives you an opportunity to read the book for free, but it also puts it on their shelf so somebody else can read it.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today, Julie. It's always
Thank you for
great to
having.
see you, and just so happy to have you on.
Thank you, John. I really enjoyed. I appreciate the space.
It's my pleasure. And I want to thank all of you, our listeners, for joining us today. I've included all the links below in the show notes that Julie just shared. So go ahead and grab a copy of her book, reach out to her, connect through her website. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, give me a thumbs up, share this episode with someone who might need to hear it. And until next time, remember, your life is your legacy. So plan ahead and make it a great day.